Tonight, we'll take you on another quiet journey through time, into one of history's more brutal chapters, told gently so your mind can rest while the past unfolds. You are 12 years old, and the world smells like smoke and horse sweat, and something else, something metallic that might be blood, or might just be the taste of fear on your tongue. The steppe stretches endlessly in all directions, a sea of grass that whispers secrets you're too young to understand, but old enough to feel in your bones. This is where friendship begins on the Mongol steppes, not with handshakes or shared toys, but with steel and sacred oaths, and the kind of promises that echo through centuries. Your name is Jamukha, though that won't matter much to history books. What matters is the boy sitting across from you in the grass, his dark eyes reflecting something wild and hungry that makes grown warriors nervous. His name is Temüjin, and he's holding a knife with the casual confidence of someone who's been using blades since he could walk. Which, knowing him, was probably yesterday. The ritual is simple, as most profound things are. You each press your thumb to the blade, just enough to draw blood, not enough to be dramatic about it. The pain is sharp and clean, like truth. You press your bleeding thumbs together, feeling his pulse against yours, warm and quick like a trapped bird. The blood mingles, becoming something new, something binding. In the old language you speak the words that will haunt you both. Anda, blood brother. Sworn companion, the other half of your soul. Until death, he says, and his voice doesn't crack the way yours does. Until death, you echo, and mean it with the fierce certainty that only children possess. You trade bows then, as tradition demands. His is better than yours, of course it is. Temüjin is always just a little better at everything. But you try not to let it show on your face. Your bow is still good, carved from mountain birch and strung with sinew you prepared yourself. When he takes it, he runs his fingers along the wood with something approaching reverence. I'll never use another, he promises, which is the kind of lie children tell when they mean to keep promises forever. The ceremony complete, you spend the afternoon doing what boys do when they've just bound their souls together. You practice killing things. Not real things, of course. Your mothers would have both your hides. But imaginary enemies, phantom armies that only you can see marching across the grasslands. You charge through the grass on foot, whooping war cries that make the horses nervous, wielding sticks like they're the finest sabres ever forged. Temüjin leads naturally, he always leads. There's something magnetic about him, something that makes even grown men stop talking when he enters a ger. You follow, and tell yourself you don't mind. After all, every great Khan needs a great general. And you're already imagining the campaigns you'll wage together, the enemies you'll crush side by side, the empire you'll carve from the bones of the world. We'll conquer everything, he declares, standing on a small rise with his arms spread wide, addressing the vast emptiness of the steppe. From the sunrise to the sunset, it will all bow before us. Us, you agree, and the word tastes sweet on your tongue. But even then, even in that moment of perfect brotherhood, there's something else lurking beneath the surface. You catch it sometimes in the way he looks at you. Not suspicious, exactly, but calculating. As if he's already measuring you, weighing your worth, deciding how useful you might be in the great game he's already playing in his head. You tell yourself you're imagining things. You're blood brothers now. That means something. That means everything. The sun begins to set, painting the grass gold and crimson, and you reluctantly head home to your respective camps. Temüjin's family situation is complicated. His father Yesuge is a minor chieftain, with enemies and ambitions in equal measure. Your own lineage is more prestigious. You're descended from ancient Mongol nobility, the old bloodlines that stretch back to the legendary ancestors. This should matter, but somehow, walking beside Temüjin, you feel like the lesser prince. Tomorrow, he says as you part ways, we'll plan the conquest of the Merkits. Tomorrow, you agree, though you suspect tomorrow will bring chores and lessons and the tedious reality of being 12 instead of legendary. That night, lying in your family's ger, staring up at the smoke hole that frames a circle of stars, you think about the oath. Your thumb still throbs where the knife bit, and you press it against your teeth, tasting copper and possibility. Somewhere out there, Temüjin is probably doing the same thing, probably planning grand campaigns in his dreams. You don't know, how could you, that this is the last completely happy moment of your life. You don't know that the boy you swore brotherhood with will become Genghis Khan, the man who will reshape the world with blood and fire. You don't know that your friendship will curdle into rivalry, your loyalty into war, your blood oath into the rope that eventually strangles you. All you know is that you have a blood brother now, and that makes you feel invincible. The stars wheel overhead, ancient and indifferent, and you drift towards sleep with the satisfied exhaustion of someone who has just bound their fate to another's. The grass rustles outside, whispering secrets in a language older than words, and if you listen carefully, really carefully, you might almost hear the sound of armies marching, of empires falling, of history holding its breath. But you're 12, and tomorrow is full of infinite possibility, and the boy who will one day order your death is sleeping peacefully under the same stars, probably dreaming of conquest and glory and the brotherhood that will define you both. Some oaths, after all, are kept in the strangest ways. You are 27 now, and the boy who once traded bows with you in the grass commands 10,000 warriors. This should not surprise you. Temüjin was always going to be extraordinary, but it does sting a little that your own forces number only 8,000. Mathematics, as it turns out, is deeply personal when it involves men who would die at your word. The blood oath still thrums between you, a connection that grows more complicated with each passing season. You can feel it sometimes, like a phantom limb, when you wake from dreams of grass and childhood promises. But childhood, unfortunately, has given way to the more pressing concerns of adulthood. Specifically, who gets to rule the scattered Mongol tribes, and whether this can be decided without quite so much bloodshed. Spoiler alert, it cannot. The irony is delicious, in the way that only impending tragedy can be. You and Temüjin want the same thing, a unified Mongolia, strong enough to resist the Chinese, the Khwarezm, all the settled peoples who look down on nomads as barbarians. The difference lies in method. He believes in merit, in loyalty earned through deed rather than birth. Revolutionary thinking, really, possibly even admirable. You, on the other hand, believe in the old ways. Blood calls to blood. The noble families have ruled for generations because they were born to rule, shaped by centuries of breeding and tradition. It's not personal. Well, it's a little personal, but mostly it's about maintaining the natural order of things. Also, and this cannot be overstated, you are descended from royalty, while Temüjin's grandfather was a perfectly respectable nobody. This matters more than you'd care to admit, even to yourself. The Kurultai, the great assembly of tribal leaders, convenes on neutral ground, beneath a sky so blue it hurts to look at directly. Hundreds of chiefs, shamans and warriors gather in a sprawling camp that smells of horses, smoke and barely contained violence. You arrive with your 8,000, banners snapping in the wind, trying to project confidence while doing mental arithmetic about whether 8,000 is enough. Temüjin arrives an hour later with his 10,000, and you have to admit, the man knows how to make an entrance. His riders move like a single organism, disciplined in a way that makes your own forces look slightly amateur by comparison. He's changed since childhood. Taller, harder, with eyes that seem to catalogue everything and everyone for future reference. When he dismounts, conversations stop. When he walks, space opens around him naturally. He nods to you across the crowd. Just once. An acknowledgement between equals, or perhaps former equals. You nod back, because what else can you do? The assembly begins with speeches, as assemblies do. Elderly chiefs stand to recite lineages, to invoke ancestors, to make points about tradition and legitimacy that would bore a stone to tears. You half listen, more interested in watching Temüjin, trying to read his intentions in the set of his shoulders, the way his fingers rest on his sword hilt. When your turn comes, you rise with the weight of centuries behind you. Your speech is good, really quite good, all about noble blood and ancient rights, about maintaining the sacred bonds between ruler and ruled that have sustained the tribe since time immemorial. You speak of your lineage, tracing it back through generations of Khans and heroes, making it clear that leadership flows in your veins like a river finding its course to the sea. The crowd listens respectfully. Some nod, a few even look convinced. Then, Temüjin stands. He doesn't speak for long. He doesn't need to. He talks about strength, about unity, about loyalty that's earned rather than inherited. He speaks of a Mongolia that could stand against any enemy, where a man's worth is measured by his deeds rather than his grandfather's accomplishments. Revolutionary stuff, delivered in a voice that makes even skeptics lean forward. But it's not the words that win the day, it's the certainty behind them. When Temüjin speaks of the future, he doesn't sound like he's describing a possibility. He sounds like he's reporting facts from tomorrow's history books. The vote, when it comes, is closer than you'd hoped, but not as close as you'd feared. The old families support you, naturally, but Temüjin has won over too many of the younger warriors, too many of the minor chiefs who see opportunity in his vision of meritocracy. Still, you have enough support to make your own claim. When the shamans ask who would be Khan, you step forward alongside Temüjin. Two blood brothers, standing face to face, each claiming the right to rule the same people. "Anda," he says quietly, "just for you," and the word carries a lifetime of shared memories. "Anda," you reply, and wonder if this is how civil wars begin, not with hatred, but with love that's grown too complicated to bear. The Kurultai dissolves into confusion. Some tribes declare for you, others for Temüjin. By morning, the Great Assembly has fractured into two camps, each convinced of their righteousness, each preparing for war. The first battle comes sooner than expected. Temüjin, ever practical, decides to settle matters quickly. His forces catch yours at dawn near a bend in the river, and for a moment, just a moment, you think you might actually win. Your cavalry charges with the fury of wronged nobility, and his front lines buckle under the impact. But Temüjin has always been better at tactics than you. While your warriors celebrate their initial success, his reserves swing wide, threatening to envelop your entire force. You're forced to withdraw. Tactical retreat, you tell yourself, though it feels remarkably similar to running away. The pursuit is brief but decisive. When the dust settles, you've lost 300 men and most of your supplies. Worse, several minor chiefs decide that backing the losing side might be bad for their health. Your army of 8,000 becomes 6,000, then 5,000, as pragmatism overcomes loyalty. Still, you score one significant victory in those early days of war. Through a combination of luck, skill, and information from sympathetic sources, you manage to capture 70 of Temüjin's officers in a single raid. 70 men who've sworn loyalty to your blood brother, who trust him with their lives, who believe in his vision of the future. You have them boiled alive. This is considered excessive, even by the standards of medieval Mongolia. There are rules about these things. Warriors should die in battle, with weapons in their hands, not screaming in cauldrons like lobsters at a feast. But you're making a point about the cost of defying legitimate authority, and sometimes points require a certain theatrical brutality. Word of the executions reaches Temüjin within days. According to your spies, he receives the news in silence, his face showing nothing. But that night, 7 of his most trusted generals request permission to hunt you down personally. He denies the request, which is either remarkably restrained or ominously calculating. You prefer to think it's restraint. Blood brothers, after all, deserve a certain consideration. The war settles into an uneasy rhythm after that. Raids and counter-raids, small victories and smaller defeats. The slow, grinding process of attrition that characterizes most conflicts. You tell yourself you're winning, or at least not losing too badly. Your bloodline remains pure, your cause remains just, and surely the ancestors are watching with approval. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, you catch yourself wondering if the boy who once pressed his thumb to yours in the grass would recognize the man who boils prisoners. If the oath you swore in childhood was meant to survive the complexities of adult ambition. The stars, as always, offer no answers. They wheel overhead with the same indifference they showed 20 years ago, when the world was simpler and friendship seemed like something that could last forever. Tomorrow will bring more war, more difficult choices, more opportunities to prove that noble blood and ancient rights matter more than charisma and innovative thinking. You sleep fitfully, dreaming of grasslands and copper-tasting promises, and wake to the sound of scouts reporting Temüjin's movements. The game continues, as games must, and you're still convinced you can win. After all, how hard could it be to defeat one former friend, even if he does have slightly better tactics and marginally more loyal followers? History, it seems, is about to provide an answer. You are 31, and peace tastes like disappointment, with notes of barely suppressed anxiety. It's been 2 years since the last major battle. 2 years of watching Temüjin's influence spread like ink through water, while your own coalition holds together through increasingly creative applications of threats and bribes. The war hasn't ended exactly. It's simply transformed into something more subtle, more patient, like a poison that takes decades to work. This is the strange season of your life, the pause between movements in a symphony that everyone knows will end in someone's death. You have time now for the luxuries you'd forgotten during the campaign years: sleep that lasts past dawn, meals that don't need to be eaten in the saddle, conversations that aren't exclusively about troop movements and supply lines. You even have time for a wife. Her name is Kulan, and she comes from a family that traces its lineage back to the same legendary ancestors as yours, which is to say she's both politically useful and genuinely beautiful, a combination rarer than you'd expect. The marriage is arranged, naturally, but arranged marriages can bloom into something deeper if tended carefully. She has intelligent eyes and a laugh that reminds you of running water. And when she listens to your plans for the future, she nods with the kind of attention that suggests she might actually care about more than just your title. You dream loudly, she tells you one morning, after you've apparently spent the night conducting imaginary battles in your sleep. Occupational hazard, you reply, though you wonder what exactly you were fighting in the dream, and whether you won. The chair you share is larger than the one you grew up in, furnished with carpets and silver ornaments that speak to your status as a Khan, or at least a man who claims to be a Khan. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, you catch yourself appreciating the simple pleasure of domestic comfort: a warm fire, a comfortable bed, the sound of your wife humming traditional songs while she works at her loom. This should be enough. A good woman, loyal followers, the respect of your peers. These are the rewards that men fight for, after all. But somehow, the sweetness is undercut by the persistent taste of unfinished business. Because somewhere out there, Temüjin is building something. The reports filter in through traders, wandering shamans, the occasional defector from his camps. He's established a permanent base now, a cluster of winter quarters, that's beginning to look suspiciously like a capital. More troubling, he's instituting reforms, reorganizing his army along decimal lines, promoting officers based on merit rather than birth, even creating a crude system of written laws. Innovation. You've always hated innovation. He's trying to create a new kind of state, one of your advisors explains, unrolling a map covered in colored markers that represent various tribal allegiances. Not just another confederation of clans, but something different. Different how, you ask, though you suspect you already know. Permanent, unified, strong enough to survive the death of its founder. This is the nightmare scenario, of course. Mongol confederations have risen and fallen for centuries, held together by the charisma of individual leaders, and dissolving into chaos the moment those leaders die. But if Temüjin is creating institutions, systems that function independently of personality, you push the thought away. Such things are barely possible among settled peoples with their cities and their books. Nomads don't build permanent anything. It's contrary to their nature, like asking the wind to hold still. Still, you find yourself riding the boundaries of your territory more often, ostensibly to hunt, but really to think. There's something meditative about the rhythm of horse and grassland, the endless horizon that puts human concerns into perspective. Out here, under the dome of sky that stretches from forever to forever, your worries about political maneuvering and tribal loyalty seem almost manageable. Almost. The hunting is good this season, deer and wild boar, the occasional antelope that provides both meat and the kind of challenging chase that keeps your riding skills sharp. You often hunt alone now, despite your advisor's objections. Apparently Khans aren't supposed to wander the steppe unguarded, which strikes you as the sort of paranoid thinking that leads to soft leadership and early graves. Besides, the solitude helps you think. And there's so much to think about. Reports of Temüjin's growing strength arrive weekly now. New tribes sworn to his banner, innovative military tactics, disturbing stories about the loyalty he inspires in common soldiers. Your own coalition remains stable, but stability isn't the same as growth. You're holding position while he advances, which is another way of saying you're losing slowly. One afternoon, tracking a wounded elk through a grove of birch trees, you realize you're close to the place where you and Temüjin first swore brotherhood. The same rolling hills, the same quality of light filtering through leaves that rustle secrets in the old language. You dismount and walk the last 100 yards, leading your horse through grass that might be the same grass, might contain the same soil that once absorbed your commingled blood. The spot itself is unmarked, of course. The steppe doesn't preserve monuments to childhood promises, but something in the landscape feels familiar. The way that ridge catches the afternoon sun, the particular configuration of stones that forms a natural windbreak. This could be the place. This could be where it all began. You sit in the grass and try to remember exactly how it felt. That moment when the knife bit your thumb, and you pressed it to his, sealing an oath that seemed as permanent as the stars. Had there been warning signs even then? Some hint of the ambition that now threatens to reshape the known world? But memory is a storyteller, and storytellers lie. All you can truly remember is the fierce joy of belonging to something larger than yourself. The absolute certainty that you and Temüjin would face the future together, whatever it might bring. Anda, you say to the empty air, testing how the word feels on your tongue, after years of thinking of him as enemy, rival, obstacle. It still fits, unfortunately. Blood brotherhood doesn't dissolve just because circumstances become complicated. Your horse snorts, impatient to continue the hunt, and you remount with a sigh. The elk has long since vanished, but that's fine. You weren't really hunting anyway. You were remembering, which is possibly more dangerous, but certainly more necessary. That night you dream of armies again, but this time they're not your armies or Temüjin's armies. They're foreign armies, vast formations marching from the settled lands to the east and west, crushing the scattered Mongol tribes beneath their organized advance. In the dream, you and Temüjin fight side by side against impossible odds, your childhood oath finally finding its proper expression in shared sacrifice. You wake before the dream resolves, unsure whether this is prophecy or wishful thinking. Kulan stirs beside you, her breathing deep and even. She's pregnant now, just barely showing, but definitely carrying the air that will justify your dynasty and secure your legacy. The thought should make you happy, but instead it fills you with a strange melancholy. What kind of world will this child inherit? Will it be the traditional Mongolia of your ancestors, with its ancient hierarchies and honoured bloodlines? Or will it be something new, shaped by Temüjin's radical vision of meritocracy and permanent institution? The question keeps you awake until dawn, staring up through the smoke hole at stars that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless Khans, most of whom are now forgotten even by their own descendants. Peace, you're beginning to realize, is just war with better meals and more time to worry about the future. Somewhere out there, your blood brother is probably lying awake too, planning the next phase of his campaign to remake the world. The thought is oddly comforting. Whatever else has changed between you, you still share the burden of sleepless nights and impossible choices. The dawn brings scouts with fresh reports of Temüjin's movements, and you rise to face another day of governing, planning and pretending that the silence between wars will last forever. But silence, like childhood, never does. You are 34, and defeat tastes like copper pennies and broken promises. The final battle, though you don't know it's final while you're fighting it, unfolds with the terrible inevitability of a nightmare where you know you're dreaming, but can't force yourself to wake up. Your 5,000 warriors face his 12,000 in a valley that might as well be the bottom of a grave, surrounded by mountains that watch with the indifference of ancient gods. It doesn't feel like a battle so much as a choreographed dance where only one partner knows the steps. The morning starts promisingly enough. Your cavalry charges with the desperate fury of men who understand that this is their last chance to matter, and for a moment, perhaps 30 seconds of glorious possibility, Temujin's front line wavers. You allow yourself a flash of hope, thinking that maybe noble blood and righteous cause still count for something in this changing world. Then his reserves appear. They rise from concealment like earth itself coming alive, warriors who must have spent the night buried in shallow trenches, covered with grass and silence. 1,000 men where there should be empty ground, positioned with the kind of tactical precision that turns battles into mathematics. Your charge becomes a trap. Your moment of advantage becomes the jaws of defeat, closing around your entire force. You've heard about Temujin's innovations. His decibel organization, his promotion by merit, his strange ideas about discipline and coordination. Experiencing them firsthand is like being caught in an avalanche. You understand the theory of what's happening, but the reality is too overwhelming to process until it's far too late to matter. Your left flank crumbles first. These are good men, warriors who've followed you for years, but they're facing something unprecedented. Enemy cavalry that moves like a single organism, responding to signals you can't even see. Your own horn calls go unanswered as unit commanders fall or flee, and what was supposed to be a coordinated assault becomes a series of isolated, desperate stands. The centre holds longer, but only because retreat is impossible with enemies on 3 sides. You fight there yourself, not from any particular heroism, but because there's literally nowhere else to go. Your sword, the one you've carried since childhood, feels strangely light in your hand as you cut down men who might have been your followers in a different timeline. One of them, a young warrior with Temujin's decimal markings on his armor, catches your blade on his shield and stares at you with something that might be recognition. "You're Jamukha," he says, not accusingly, but with the wonder of someone meeting a legend. "I am," you confirm. And kill him before he can decide whether that's a good thing or bad thing. The battle ends not with a dramatic climax, but with a gradual recognition that fighting has become pointless. Your forces don't break so much as dissolve, individual warriors deciding that suicide isn't required by their oaths and melting away into the landscape. You can't blame them. Loyalty is easier to maintain when it doesn't involve certain death. You find yourself alone on a ridge overlooking the carnage, still mounted, but surrounded by men whose loyalty lies elsewhere. They don't attack, perhaps out of respect, perhaps out of uncertainty about what to do with a defeated Khan who's still breathing. They simply wait, like courtiers attending a formal ceremony they don't entirely understand. Temujin arrives an hour later, riding across the battlefield with the casual confidence of someone reviewing a construction project. He's changed again since you last saw him up close. Harder, certainly, but also somehow more substantial, as if victory has given him additional dimensions. When he looks at you, his eyes hold the weight of accumulated triumphs. "Anda," he says, and the word carries 20 years of shared history. "Anda," you reply, because what else is there to say? He dismounts and climbs the ridge alone, leaving his guards at a respectful distance. This is either supreme confidence or elaborate theatre, though with Temujin it's often both. When he reaches you, he stops just out of sword's reach, close enough for conversation, far enough to avoid unfortunate accidents. "You fought well," he says, and sounds like he means it. Not well enough, apparently. He almost smiles at that. Almost. No, not well enough. You expect him to demand your surrender, to offer terms, to engage in the ritual negotiations that conclude most conflicts between civilized enemies. Instead, he stands silently beside you, looking out over the valley where your dream of ancient bloodlines and noble tradition has just died its final death. "Do you remember," he says eventually, "the first time we hunted together? You were 11, maybe 12. We tracked that wounded deer for 3 days." You do remember. The deer had been shot by some other hunter, but not killed cleanly, and young Temujin had insisted on following its trail until you could end its suffering properly. You'd thought him foolishly sentimental at the time. "We never caught it," you say. "We did, eventually, on the 4th day. It had died beside a stream." Alone. He turns to look at you directly. I learned something that day about the importance of finishing things properly. The implication hangs in the air like smoke. You're the wounded deer now, and he's the hunter who doesn't leave jobs half done. The metaphor is elegant, even poetic, which makes it somehow worse than straightforward threats. Your terms? You ask. No terms. You're my anda. That still means something. This should be comforting, but something in his tone suggests that blood brotherhood doesn't necessarily preclude other considerations. You've heard stories about Temüjin's treatment of defeated enemies, generally merciful to those who submit, ruthlessly final with those who continue to resist. The question is which category you fall into. I won't kneel, you say, though you're not entirely sure why this matters. I wouldn't ask you to. He signals to his guards, and they approach with the careful respect due to significant prisoners. No chains, no unnecessary roughness, but also no possibility of escape. They're professionals, and you're a problem to be managed efficiently. As they escort you down the ridge, you catch sight of the battlefield one more time, bodies scattered like punctuation marks across a sentence written in blood and ambition. Most of them were your men, though Temüjin's forces paid their own price for victory. War, you reflect, is remarkably expensive for everyone involved. The captivity that follows is almost luxurious, your own gear, furnished with carpets and bronze mirrors that speak to your status as an honoured prisoner, guards who call you my lord and mean it, at least partially, meals that would satisfy a Khan, which you technically still are, even if your kingdom now consists of a single tent and the grudging respect of your captors. Temüjin visits daily, always alone, always bearing some small courtesy. Cummage from his personal supply, news of mutual acquaintances, updates on the political situation that no longer directly concerns you but might still interest a man of your background. These conversations dance around the central question of your fate with the elaborate courtesy of trained diplomats. He tells you about his plans, the unification of all Mongol tribes under a single banner, the reforms he's implementing, the vision of a state that could stand against any enemy. It's impressive, even inspiring, though you're careful not to let your admiration show too clearly. You could help, he says one evening, apropos of nothing in particular. Your knowledge of the old families, your understanding of traditional law, there's a place for you in what I'm building. The offer hangs between you like a sword balanced on its point. Submission, disguised as opportunity, or opportunity disguised as submission. Either way, it requires abandoning everything you've fought for. As a subordinate, you say, as a brother. But you both know that brotherhood, like everything else, has been redefined by circumstances. The boy who pressed his thumb to yours in the grass might have shared power as equals. The man who conquered you at the Battle of Dalan Baljut has moved beyond such simple arrangements. I need time to consider, you tell him, which is another way of saying no, while maintaining the fiction that you still have choices. He nods, understanding the subtext perfectly. Of course, take all the time you need. That night, staring up at stars that shine with the same indifference they've shown since childhood, you finally accept what you've known for months. This story has only one possible ending. Temüjin can't leave you alive as a permanent reminder of what he used to be, and you can't live as a subordinate to the boy you once called Anda as an equal. Some problems, as it turns out, have no solutions, only conclusions. The mountains around your prison glow silver in the moonlight, eternal and patient as tombstones. Tomorrow will bring another visit, another careful conversation, another opportunity to delay the inevitable. But inevitability, your learning, is remarkably persistent. It doesn't mind waiting because it knows how the story ends. You close your eyes and dream of grasslands and childhood oaths, of a time when the future seemed infinite and friendship felt like something that could survive anything. Even war, even ambition, even the simple, terrible arithmetic of power that reduces blood brothers to problems requiring elegant solutions. The mountains keep their counsel, and morning comes whether you're ready or not. You are 35 years old, and today is the day you die. This should be more dramatic than it feels. Death, after all, deserves a certain theatrical weight. but mostly you're conscious of small details. The way morning light slants through the walls of your jair, the sound of horses moving restlessly in the distance, the fact that your last meal was slightly oversalted mutton and tea that had grown cold while you weren't paying attention. Temüjin arrives earlier than usual, before the camp has fully awakened. He enters without ceremony, declining the formal announcements that usually herald visits from great khans. This morning, he's just a man with difficult business to conclude, and you appreciate the absence of pageantry. It's time, he says, and you both understand that no further explanation is necessary. You've had weeks to prepare for this moment, and the waiting has been its own form of torture. Not cruel torture. Temüjin is many things, but unnecessarily vicious isn't among them. But the special agony of knowing exactly when and how your story will end. It's like reading the final page of a book before starting the first chapter. Intellectually interesting, emotionally devastating. "I have a request," you say, rising from your sleeping furs with what you hope passes for dignity. "Of course. I want to die without spilling blood on the earth, the old way for noblemen." This is tradition speaking. The ancient belief that spilled noble blood pollutes the ground and brings misfortune to whoever causes it. Probably superstition, but superstition that's kept your ancestors' executions relatively civilized for generations. Instead of swords or arrows, condemned nobility are granted death by suffocation or strangulation, methods that preserve both honor and agricultural productivity. Temüjin considers this with the gravity it deserves. He could refuse, of course. Traditions mean whatever the powerful decide they mean, but refusing would carry its own implications about his relationship to the old ways, his respect for the customs that shaped both your childhoods. "Grunted," he says simply. Relief washes over you, though you're not entirely sure why it matters. Dead is dead, regardless of methodology. But somehow knowing you'll die according to the ancient protocols makes the approaching end feel less like murder and more like the completion of a ritual that began when you first pressed your bleeding thumb to his. "Will you—" You begin, then stop, unsure how to finish the question. "I'll stay with you," he says, understanding, "until the end." This is more than you dared hope for. Blood brothers, after all, shouldn't die alone. They bring the materials an hour later, silk ropes and a wooden framework that looks like it was constructed specifically for this purpose, professional work, which suggests Temüjin has given considerable thought to the mechanics of your execution. The men who carry it are respectful, almost reverent, treating the apparatus like a sacred object rather than an instrument of death. The shamans have been consulted, Temüjin informs you, as the framework is assembled. They say the omens are favorable. Your death will bring honor to both our houses. You nod, though you suspect the shamans would find favorable omens in a bowl of spoiled milk if their Khan required it. Still, the gesture matters. Even in execution, there are proper forms to observe. The executioner is a professional, calm, efficient, with the bedside manner of a physician administering necessary medicine. He explains the process with clinical detachment, how the silk rope will be positioned, how long the procedure typically takes, what you can expect in terms of sensation and consciousness. It's oddly comforting to discuss your death with someone who approaches it as a technical problem rather than an emotional crisis. "Any final words?" the executioner asks, which is traditional but feels absurdly formal under the circumstances. You look at Temüjin, standing quietly beside the framework like a mourner at a funeral that hasn't quite started yet. His face shows nothing, no satisfaction, no regret, just the careful neutrality of someone fulfilling an unpleasant obligation. But his eyes remember grasslands and childhood oaths and the taste of copper on young tongues. "Do you remember," you say, not to the executioner but to your blood brother, "when we stole that horse from the Temüjin camp? We were 14 and thought we were so clever." The ghost of a smile crosses Temüjin's face. "We got lost for 3 days trying to find our way home. You navigated by the stars. Badly. Very badly. We almost ended up in Khitai territory." The memory hangs between you, a moment of shared warmth in the cold morning air. You'd been so proud of that theft, convinced you were practicing for greater heists to come. The horse itself was worthless, old, half lame, with a temper that made riding it an exercise in mutual antagonism. but it had belonged to enemies, which made it precious beyond price. We should have kept going, you say, ridden all the way to the edge of the world. The edge of the world, Temüjin repeats, and for a moment he sounds like the boy who once promised to conquer everything from sunrise to sunset. The executioner clears his throat politely. Professional schedules, apparently, don't accommodate extended reminiscence. You take your position within the wooden framework, feeling the silk rope settle around your neck with surprising gentleness. The material is fine quality, probably Chinese, certainly expensive. Even your execution has been planned with attention to detail. Anda, Temüjin says, and the word carries the weight of 20 years and 2 lifetimes of choices. Anda, you reply, and mean it, with the same fierce certainty you felt as a child. The pressure begins gradually, professionally applied by someone who understands the difference between killing and torturing. There's no pain exactly, more like a gentle insistence that breathing has become optional. The world starts to acquire a dreamy quality, as if you're viewing it through water or thick glass. You keep your eyes on Temüjin's face, watching him watch you die. He doesn't look away, which is something. Blood brothers, after all, deserve that much attention during their final moments. His expression remains carefully controlled, but you think you catch something that might be grief flickering behind his eyes. Or maybe that's just oxygen deprivation playing tricks with your vision. The strangest thing is how quiet it all becomes. The sounds of the camp, horses, voices, the everyday business of an army in motion, fade to a distant murmur, then to silence. The last thing you hear clearly is Temüjin's voice, so soft it might be imagination. Forgive me, but consciousness is already slipping away, carrying you toward whatever comes next with the inexorable gentleness of a river flowing toward the sea. Your last coherent thought is a fragment of the old children's song you used to sing while herding sheep. Under the eternal blue sky, all things find their rest. The rest, apparently, includes blood brothers who backed the wrong horse in history's greatest game. When it's over, and the executioner confirms that it's over with the same professional detachment he brought to the process, Temüjin stands alone beside your body for a long moment. The guards and officials wait at a respectful distance, understanding that some farewells require privacy even after death. What he thinks in that moment, what words or regrets or justifications pass through his mind, becomes another secret the steps will keep forever. But those who watch from a distance report that his lips move slightly, as if he's speaking to someone who can no longer answer. When he finally turns away, his shoulders carry the particular weight that comes from burning bridges you built yourself. Behind him, your body rests in the wooden framework like a figure in a shrine, noble blood preserved from spilling on the earth, ancient customs honored even in revolution. The shamans will say later that your spirit departed cleanly, without lingering resentment or unfinished business. This may even be true. Death, after all, has a way of simplifying even the most complicated relationships. But some oaths, it seems, are stronger than death, and some friendships leave scars that never quite heal, no matter how many empires you build over them. The sun climbs higher, indifferent to human drama, and life continues its inexorable forward motion. There are campaigns to plan, enemies to defeat, a world to reshape according to one man's vision of the future. Some prices, after all, are worth paying, even when they cost everything you once held sacred. Even when they taste like childhood promises and copper pennies and the particular grief that comes from killing what you love most. You are dead now, which should simplify things considerably, but death, it turns out, has its own complications. Your body lies in state for 3 days, according to custom, wrapped in silk and felt and surrounded by the weapons and ornaments that marked your earthly status. Temüjin, who has begun calling himself Genghis Khan because apparently conquering his childhood friend wasn't quite enough drama for one lifetime, provides the funeral with all appropriate honours. He even attends personally, standing at the head of your bier like a mourner instead of the architect of your demise. This might be guilt, or politics, or simply the recognition that some relationships transcend their messy conclusions. The assembled nobles and warriors observe his grief with the careful attention of people trying to decode what emotions are acceptable to display in the presence of absolute power. Your wife, Kulan, weeps with the particular desperation of someone whose entire world has just been redefined. She's carrying your child, 8 months along now, round with the future that will never know its father. Temüjin speaks with her privately after the ceremony, and whatever he says seems to provide some comfort. Perhaps he promises protection for your heir, or perhaps he simply acknowledges the magnitude of her loss. Either way, she nods and manages to stop crying long enough to thank him properly. The burial itself follows ancient tradition. Your body committed to the earth in an unmarked grave, its location known only to a few trusted servants who will carry the secret to their own graves. This is how Mongol nobility has always hidden from their enemies' posthumous revenge, by becoming indistinguishable from the grassland that bore them. In death at least you achieve the anonymity that eluded you in life. But death, as it happens, is only the beginning of your story's second act. Within a year, Genghis Khan, the title still sounds pretentious when applied to your childhood friend, but history doesn't care about your aesthetic opinions, completes the unification of Mongolia. Every tribe, every clan, every stubborn holdout who once claimed independence now bows to his authority. The old system of competing bloodlines and inherited privilege dies its final death, replaced by something unprecedented, a nomadic empire organized around merit and loyalty rather than birth and tradition. It's exactly what he promised to build, which makes your opposition to it seem either prescient or tragically short-sighted, depending on your perspective. The conquest expands beyond Mongolia with the inevitable logic of successful revolution. The Western Xia fall first, then the Jin dynasty, then kingdom after kingdom as the Mongol war machine discovers that its innovations travel well. Decimal organization, promotion by merit, religious tolerance, systematic intelligence gathering. All the administrative innovations you once dismissed as impossibly foreign to nomadic culture prove remarkably effective when applied to world conquest. Your name, when it's mentioned at all, becomes a footnote to Genghis Khan's rise. Jamukha, the last representative of the old ways, defeated at the Battle of Dalan Baljut. Sometimes you're portrayed as a tragic figure, sometimes as an obstacle overcome by historical necessity. The truth, as usual, is more complicated than either version allows. But here's the thing about being dead. You get to observe everything without the burden of having opinions about it. From your unmarked grave, you watch the years pass with the detached interest of someone reading a particularly engrossing history book. And what you see is fascinating in the way that natural disasters are fascinating when they're happening to someone else. Genghis Khan conquers half the world, but he never calls anyone else, and, again. Never presses his bleeding thumb to another's, never swears brotherhood with the casual certainty of youth. This might be political calculation. Sworn brothers, after all, can become inconvenient when absolute power is the goal. But you prefer to think it's something else. Some recognition that certain oaths can only be sworn once. Certain relationships can't be replicated or replaced. Your son grows up under Genghis Khan's protection, acknowledged as nobility despite his father's opposition to the new order. He's given education, opportunities, a place in the expanding empire that reflects his mixed heritage. Sometimes, watching him train with other young warriors, you catch glimpses of yourself at that age. The same stubborn pride, the same assumption that bloodline matters more than ability. He never learns exactly what happened between his father and the great Khan. The official story is sufficiently heroic to satisfy a boy's need for legends, sufficiently vague to avoid uncomfortable questions about loyalty and betrayal. Genghis Khan, to his credit, never uses your son as a symbol or a weapon against your memory. Some mercies apparently survive even the most pragmatic considerations. Decades pass. The Mongol Empire expands to encompass territories that would have been unimaginable during your lifetime, from Korea to Poland, from Siberia to India. The boy who once promised to conquer everything from sunrise to sunset makes good on his boast with a thoroughness that would be comical if it weren't so terrifying. Cities fall, dynasties crumble, and the known world reshapes itself around Mongol administration and Mongol law. But even empire builders grow old. When Genghis Khan dies, quietly, in his sleep, like any other mortal despite the legends that will claim otherwise, His funeral preparations include a curious detail. Among the weapons and treasures buried with his body, archaeologists will one day find a bow, a simple thing carved from mountain birch and strung with sinew, bearing the distinctive markings of Mongol craftsmanship from the late 12th century. It's the bow you traded him during your childhood oath, the one he promised never to replace. This might be sentimentality, or it might be something deeper. Recognition that some gifts transcend their circumstances, that blood brotherhood leaves marks on the soul that outlast political necessity. Either way, it suggests that whatever else he became, some part of him remembered the boy who bled into the grass beside him and meant it when he promised until death. The empire he built outlasts him by decades, fragmenting eventually into constituent khanates that will reshape Eurasia for centuries. His descendants rule from China to Eastern Europe, carrying forward the innovations that once seemed so threatening to traditional ways: merit-based promotion, religious tolerance, systematic administration. All the radical ideas that cost you your crown become the foundation stones of successor states. Your opposition to these changes is remembered, when it's remembered at all, as the last gasp of an obsolete system. This judgment is probably fair, though fairness and truth aren't always the same thing. You fought for something real, the belief that bloodline and tradition matter, that change for its own sake isn't necessarily improvement, that some innovations come at costs too high to justify their benefits. History, predictably, sided with the winner. But history, as it turns out, is just the first draft of a much longer story. Centuries later, when the Mongol Empire is itself a memory, and scholars debate the mechanisms of its rise and fall, your relationship with Genghis Khan will be reinterpreted through different lenses. Sometimes you're tragic heroes torn apart by historical forces beyond your control. Sometimes you're symbols of different approaches to leadership and governance. Sometimes you're just two boys who made promises they couldn't keep. All of these interpretations contain fragments of truth, which is about as much accuracy as any historical relationship can expect. From your perspective, eternal, detached, no longer burdened by the need to choose sides, the whole drama seems both inevitable and pointless. Inevitable because personalities like Genghis Khan's don't accept limitations gracefully. Pointless because the world would have changed eventually regardless of your opposition. Progress, your learning, has its own momentum independent of individual will. But some things endure beyond the reach of historical interpretation. In the place where you first swore brotherhood, the grass still grows each spring, with the same green intensity that witnessed your childhood oath. Nomad children still play war games with sticks and imagination, still promise eternal loyalty with the fierce certainty that only the young possess. The rituals of blood brotherhood still bind souls together, still create connections that survive politics and ambition and the simple passage of time. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right across the steppes and the light falls at the proper angle, you could swear you hear two voices carried on the breeze. Young voices, bright with possibility, swearing oaths they can't possibly understand, to a future they'll spend their lives trying to create or destroy. "Anda," one voice says. "Anda," the other replies. And for a moment, the world is 12 years old again, and friendship feels like something that could last forever. Some promises, after all, are kept in the strangest ways. Some oaths survive their makers, growing stronger in death than they ever were in life. And some stories continue long after their supposed endings, echoing through generations of children who discover that the most important things, loyalty, sacrifice, the terrible cost of growing up, never really change. The grass remembers everything, the sky forgets nothing, and somewhere in the space between memory and forgetting, two blood brothers rest together in the silence that follows all great stories. Until death, they had promised, and even after. Thank you for listening to another episode of Brutal History for Sleep. We hope you've enjoyed this soothing tale of childhood friendship, political ambition, and the inevitable march of historical progress. Sweet dreams. Now, for those of you who stayed awake despite our best efforts, here's a helpful summary that will absolutely clear up any confusion about what actually happened versus what we may have creatively interpreted for dramatic effect. The facts, as we know them. The historical relationship between Jamukha and Temüjin, later Genghis Khan, represents one of the most fascinating personal dynamics in medieval history, though separating fact from legend requires considerable archaeological detective work. Jamukha and Temüjin likely knew each other from childhood, growing up in the fractured political landscape of late 12th century Mongolia. The Mongol tribes existed in a complex web of shifting alliances, with leadership determined by a combination of inherited status and demonstrated ability. Jamukha came from established nobility. He could trace his lineage to respected Mongol ancestors, while Temujin's family, though respectable, lacked the same prestigious bloodline. The two may indeed have sworn some form of brotherhood pact, as such arrangements were common among young Mongol males. The Andal relationship created bonds of mutual loyalty that often transcended tribal boundaries, though these oaths frequently became complicated when political ambitions intervened. By their 20s, both men had emerged as significant tribal leaders. Jamukha commanded respect among traditional Mongol aristocracy, who appreciated his commitment to established hierarchies and customary law. Temüjin, meanwhile, attracted followers through military innovation and a radically different approach to loyalty, promoting based on merit rather than birth, incorporating defeated enemies into his forces and implementing administrative reforms that increased efficiency. The conflict between them escalated through the 1190s. Jamukha declared himself Genghis Khan, universal ruler, around 1201, gathering support from tribes who opposed Temujin's revolutionary changes. The historical record confirms several major battles between their forces, with Jamukha initially achieving some success before Temujin's superior organization and tactics ultimately prevailed. The Battle of Dalimbaljut, though details remain sketchy, appears to have been the decisive engagement. Temujin's forces overwhelmed Jamukha's coalition, leading to the latter's capture. Historical sources do record that Jamukha executed 70 of Temujin's officers by boiling them alive, a particularly brutal method even by medieval standards, which may have contributed to defections from his cause. Following his defeat, Jamukha was indeed taken prisoner by his former blood brother. The secret history of the Mongols, our primary source for these events, suggests that Temüjin offered Jamukha opportunities to join his administration, recognizing his rival's abilities and noble lineage. Jamukha reportedly refused these overtures, maintaining that only one of them could truly rule the Mongols. The execution, when it came, followed traditional Mongol customs for noble prisoners. Jamukha specifically requested death without spilling blood on the earth, a practice reserved for high-ranking captives that involved suffocation or strangulation rather than cutting weapons. Temüjin honored this request, demonstrating either genuine respect for their former relationship or calculated political theater designed to show his adherence to Mongol customs. After eliminating his primary rival, Temüjin completed the unification of Mongolia and adopted the title Genghis Khan around 1206. His administrative innovations, decimetal military organization, meritocratic promotion, systematic intelligence gathering, religious tolerance, proved remarkably effective for both governance and conquest. These reforms enabled the creation of the largest contiguous land empire in human history, stretching from Korea to Eastern Europe at its height. The personal dimension of the Temüjin-Jamukha relationship likely influenced broader historical developments. Jamukha's opposition represented the last significant challenge to Temüjin's revolutionary approach to Mongol society. His defeat marked the end of traditional tribal aristocracy as the dominant political force, replaced by Genghis Khan's merit-based system that would define Mongol administration for generations. Archaeological evidence suggests that Mongol funeral practices did include burying important personal items with deceased leaders. While we cannot confirm the specific detail about Jamukha's childhood bow being interred with Genghis Khan, such gestures would align with documented customs regarding meaningful possessions. The broader historical impact remains undeniable. Genghis Khan's conquest reshaped Eurasian politics, demographics, and culture in ways that continued for centuries. His legal code, administrative practices, and military innovations influenced successor states long after the original empire fragmented. The conflict with Jamukha, representing traditional versus innovative approaches to leadership, foreshadowed similar tensions throughout the imperial period. Modern historians debate whether Jamukha's resistance was tragically misguided or prescient criticism of authoritarian centralization. His commitment to established customs and noble privileges reflected genuine concerns about rapid social change, even as his methods proved inadequate against Temüjin's innovations. The personal tragedy underlying these political developments, childhood friends becoming mortal enemies, illustrates how individual relationships can become entangled with historical forces beyond any single person's control. Their story suggests that even the most profound personal bonds may prove insufficient when competing visions of the future collide with the unforgiving mathematics of political power. Thanks again for listening, and sweet dreams.